Fox News host Trey Gowdy had some thoughts about tonight's State of the Union address by Joe Biden that involved some hilarious remarks about Lauren Boebert. Now, I do want to preface this a little bit because the part that caught my eye was obviously his roasting of Lauren Boebert, but there was a bit of analysis that I disagree with too. So great to see the mocking of Lauren Boebert. Then there's also some thoughts I have on the rest of Gowdy's analysis, and then also just generally about the State of the Union upcoming again tonight. But before getting into any of that, here is former Republican congressman and current Fox News host Trey Gowdy on with Harris Faulkner. And while you're watching this clip, if you would please make sure to like the video and click the alert bell, that would be greatly appreciated.
That this is going to take.
Yeah, well, I would also tell him, as an old washed-up prosecutor, I've heard good speeches and I've heard long speeches, but I've never heard a good long speech. I mean, what is his purpose tonight? What does he want to communicate? He needs to communicate some level of mental acuity. That is his goal. Policy, no one is going to change his or her mind based on something that comes out of his mouth tonight based on policy. They want to know that he has the mental acuity to make it 4 more years. On the Republican side, people are going to be watching to see whether or not members or vaping or singing along with the songs or getting handsy with a seatmate. They want to see how Republicans, are they capable of acting like adults in public? So those are your reasons to watch the State of the Union. Does Biden fall asleep during his own speech? And can Republicans avoid being arrested? Those are the 2 reasons to watch.
All right. So I take it you were giving us examples of what can happen if he falls asleep. All right. So let's get to this. The White House.
Or go to Beetlejuice in Colorado. Yes.
Oh, goodness. The White House fired back after defense attorney Ashley.
Nothing's better than watching Harris Faulkner respond to that rather uncomfortably. So let's actually come back to the funny and true part about Lauren Boebert, and I'll play one of my favorite clips relating to that. But let's start with his thoughts about what Biden has to do tonight. So essentially his analysis was Biden has to show he's on his game. Republicans have to not look like fools. Those should be their respective goals, according to Trey Gowdy. And on the Biden point, I've obviously been discussing extensively lately my irritation with the media's obsession with Biden's age. It's not that it's not a factor. It is. But if you were to weigh the importance of Biden's record and policy achievements versus his age and the lives of Americans, specifically in their material well-being, obviously his age would be close to the bottom of the list and its impact on people's lives. But because reality doesn't shape politics, the perception of reality does. The media is doing a huge disservice overemphasizing something and thus distorting the magnitude of that something in the way people are perceiving reality. So I've been talking about that a lot lately and don't need to rant about it all over again here. But the point Gowdy's making, I guess, is regardless of where you would fall in that debate or conversation, and I'm sure me and him would disagree, Biden does need to assert competence and acuity in his speech because regardless of how you feel about it, the discussion is definitely going on a lot about his age. And that bit of analysis from Gowdy, I don't disagree with. He does need to assert that. And I expect that he will tonight, especially given his recent track record with strong State of the Union addresses. And more on that a little bit later. But I very much disagreed with Trey Gowdy saying Americans have made up their minds on policy, and that's not something that is going to win them over if Biden really emphasizes those sorts of discussions. That's one of the biggest misnomers you can imagine. One of the most misunderstood phenomena in American politics right now is the success of the Biden administration on a policy front. And a lot of that comes down to, of course, misinformation from the right and noise on other subjects, but also just a lack of proper messaging and an inability to break through. Clearly, people aren't being informed as effectively as they could and should be about what Biden's administration has actually been working on every single day. For example, in my personal life, sort of just as an anecdotal study, I'll take time with people who I know don't already watch my show, don't already keep up with politics every single day, just to walk through in a fact-driven way the policy record of Joe Biden. And every single time by the end of the list, they respond by saying something to the effect of, why have I never heard all this before? And inevitably their view of Biden as a candidate and as a president changes significantly in a positive direction. Just recently, I went through the rather long list in a segment. I'll link that video in the description of this video if you haven't watched it yet, again, where I go through that in depth. And then we've looked at polling too that suggests a similar situation. Ask people in a poll how they feel about Joe Biden, then tell them about his policy record just based on the facts, then ask them again, his approval rating surges. So contrary to what Trey Gowdy said there about people not really caring about policy, I do think Biden needs to walk people through what he's actually doing to improve their lives. Because it seems that conversation, just a fact-based analysis, reporting on what policies are being implemented, the governance of Biden is lost in most of the media. And this will be one of the largest audiences he has a chance to speak in front of at one time. And so I think it is important to use it as an opportunity to inform people on his record and policy goals to going forward. Now, before we get back to what Gowdy had to say about Lauren Boebert and my response to it, let me remind you of the best moment from Biden's last State of the Union address, and one of the reasons why I think it's going to go just fine tonight, where he cornered Republicans and forced them to agree on national TV to not touching Medicare and Social Security benefits. And I'll remind you, before you watch this, that Biden's referencing Rick Scott's plan, Republican senator from Florida, that explicitly called for the sunsetting of all federal programs after 5 years if they're not renewed. So Biden will point that out, and then you'll see all these Republicans, oh my gosh, they're so aghast. Oh. But then many of the Republicans that the broadcast cuts to themselves have documented plans to cut benefits. So it's all performance. And I do feel compelled quickly to say too, because it's at the core of this conversation, as we talked about in the past, there are very simple and correct ways to continue funding these programs that don't include cutting benefits, mainly more responsibly taxing those at the top of the economic ladder, for example, so that the Social Security payroll tax doesn't put so much of a larger burden on lower and middle income earners than it does on high income earners. Absurd. But we won't get into that here. Take a look.
Take the economy hostage. I get it. Unless I agree to their economic plans. All of you at home should know what those plans are. Instead of making the wealthy pay their fair share, some Republicans want Medicare and Social Security to sunset. I'm not saying it's a majority. Let me give you, anybody who doubts it, contact my office. I'll give you a copy. I'll give you a copy of the proposal. That means Congress doesn't vote. Well, I'm glad to see you. No, I tell you, I enjoy conversion. You know, it means if Congress doesn't keep the programs the way they are, they'd go away. Other Republicans say, I'm not saying it's a majority of you. I don't even think it's even a significant, but it's being proposed by individuals. I'm not politely not naming them, but it's being proposed by some of you. Look, folks, the idea is that we're not going to be moved into being threatened to default on the debt if we don't respond. Folks, as we all apparently agree, Social Security and Medicare is off the books now, right? They're not to be stopped. All right.
Yeah, so that's the contrast that the American people need to see. Biden cornering Republicans into them committing to not touching Social Security and Medicare, Republicans screaming like a bunch of school children, and then after the speech, the fact checkers having to come out and say, yeah, everything Biden said in that clip was absolutely accurate, and the accusations of liar coming from Marjorie Greene were inaccurate. Now to address what Trey Gowdy said about Lauren Boebert. Hilarious, of course, and I would remind you of that Beetlejuice moment he referred to, but as I've previously mentioned, every time I show it on the show, my videos get restricted by age because I guess the content's too inappropriate. My goodness, Lauren. But yes, Lauren Boebert was having the good old time with her guest at that musical, was also vaping and being crazy, got asked to leave, flipped off the workers, made a whole scene, and said something to the effect of, "Do you know who I am?" Every time I picture her saying that, I just... So I cringe badly, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So she should be mocked for that until she's no longer in Congress, which just might be very soon. And I'll remind you now of Denver news anchor Kyle Clark's response to Lauren Boebert's Beetlejuice debacle, a clip that I've played a couple of times. Take a look.
Republican Congresswoman Lauren Boebert's recent performance of sorts that got her thrown out of the theater in Denver was a lot of things, but it wasn't a surprise. I haven't seen a single person say why I am shocked that Lauren Boebert was rude, disruptive, and belligerent. This is, after all, the Congresswoman who suggested that a Muslim colleague was a suicide bomber. I haven't seen anyone surprised that Boebert did not tell the truth about what happened. Because, I mean, days before, we just fact-checked her latest false claim about migrants. I haven't seen anyone say that it was out of character for the Congresswoman to appear to berate theater staff members who were just trying to do their jobs. Really, the only surprise in all of this is that Boebert, once she got caught, apologized and said that she didn't live up to her values. What? I mean, when Boebert didn't know that the cameras were watching, she was exactly who she is when she does know people are watching. Boebert reportedly asked the theater staff, "Don't you know who I am?" Yes, we do.
Great stuff. If you have not watched my interview with Democratic Congressman and nominee for Senate in Texas, Colin Allred, he's going up against Ted Cruz, please go watch it. He allowed us to conduct his first interview as the nominee for Senate in the state of Texas with this show. Very exciting. So make sure, like I said, that you've watched it, and the link is right here. And then if you want to subscribe to the YouTube channel, it's down below that.